In the meantime, an educational accountability group, the Speak Out Africa Initiative SOA, says it will embark on a 30-day campaign to reform the UTME and the JAMB system with the hashtag reform UTME/JAMB. This will kickstart on the 1st of June 2025. By speaking out against the systemic failures in the education system, SOI says it aims to catalyze change and ensure that the rights of Nigerian students are protected and respected. The organization plans to engage with stakeholders, including government officials, education experts, and civil society groups to push for meaningful reforms and accountability in the education sector.
The emotional outpouring of JAMB registrar may not reflect personal regrets, may reflect personal regrets rather. But we, the Nigerian people, need more than tears. We demand structural reform, institutional accountability, and urgent policy actions to protect the future of our dear children. The 2025 UTME debacle is symptomatic of a deeper systemic rot in Nigeria's education system, which has been marred by the following: the system-wide biometric failures and power outages in many CBT centers, breakdowns of multiple CBT, that is computer-based testing centers across the countries, phantom results and unjustifiable zero scores that we do records, and OPEC complaint or even non-availability of a redress mechanism for candidates of JAMB, leaving thousands of students in limbo.
All right, joining us to discuss the 2025 UTME receipt results, some of the major issues encountered in this year's examination is the convener of Speak Out Africa Initiative, SOI, an educational accountability group, Kenneth Chukwudi. Kenneth, thanks for joining us on Arise, on Newsnight on Arise News.
You're welcome. Thank you, Nigerians.
Good. Before we go into what you talked about, symptomatic and all the issues and challenges experienced in the JAMB UTME, what's your sense of the scores? Even after the receipt, looks like it doesn't get any better.
Exactly. Exactly. I think from data about 29.3%.
Yeah.
Out of that, not to talk about the other about 21,000 candidates that failed to show up in the receipt. And so the question is this: we're already in a mess as a nation, and if anybody is trying to cover the truth, trying to be economical with the truth, then the person is not wishing Nigeria well. And it's better at this point that we begin to know how to, to close the gap, the existing gaps, and begin to mend fences. And this time around, it has to do with the systemic issues, because the problem goes beyond the face, what we are seeing in the face. Because a lot of questions that one will begin to ask. This same JAMB and Federal Ministry of Education, if you remember, if I take if you go back memory lane, immediately result was released quickly. The way they rushed to release the results was told Nigerians that it is now that Nigerians are beginning to see that because of the strong measure that they have put in place, that is what was the reason for the low performance from the Federal Ministry of Education and even JAMB itself, until when accountability groups and education, outfits like EduCare, stakeholders begin to question and say, no. It was after that Nigeria even came up and JAMB now owned up to the fact, from technical glitches to human error and whatever it may be, and today to now begin to see what we are seeing about those who even hacked and alleged arrests that we have witnessed. What has this showed you? Because I cannot begin to look at a body like JAMB that was supposed to be the synergy, an example in West Africa, to have this kind of mess. We might have tolerated technical glitch regarding when you talk about election, but Nigerians will not take it, because we are talking about the future of the country. In 20, 30 years to come, some of the people you are seeing today will no longer be alive. So the Nigeria, if we are going to have Nigeria in tomorrow, is the people we are talking about, 1.9 millions, that found themselves, who has been, we've lost a 19-year-old girl and several. And let me use opportunity to say, this is not the first time that JAMB has happened. Let me take you back. Last year, a good number, about 21,000 people, recorded 0.
Now, Kenneth, you talked about, you said this whole imbroglio is not just what we're seeing on the face value.
Exactly.
It's symptomatic of a system rot. Because let me remind you, receipt has taken place. The same thing has occurred. Yeah. So it's not a question of, it's not now a question of hacking, as it were.
Of course.
It shows that something is wrong. When you talk about symptomatic, being symptomatic of the system rot, what is the rot here? Let's get to the brass tacks. I mean, to the root. What are we talking about? What are you talking about here when you say system?
Now, we are saying, and that's why we are pushing for a reform. We are saying that what has happened now has to do with the system. This is a systemic issue. So it's not about, some persons are talking, it may not be about the person who is at the hem or affair of JAMB.
Okay.
It may not be about. Why I don't condemn those who are clamoring and pushing that he should step aside and all those things. But our focus is on systemic reform. So that whoever that is going to come and take over leadership of that board will not find himself or herself in the same mess. Now, because issues, like you have said, the receipts is still very poor, 29.3%.
Yeah.
And so that tells you that I think what JAMB is doing now, they are just trying to, it's like when you are just trying to stand on your feet, just to find a way. But they have to own up, and they have to come up and tell Nigerians that beyond the tears of the registrar, that there are systemic issues that need to be resolved. Now, people begin to, now you're supposed to ask questions, for example.
And then, what are these systemic issues? That's one. Because if you don't point to a problem, you can't even solve it.
Exactly.
And then, what reforms should we be looking at?
Now, one is that when you talk about systemic issue, of course, there are a number of them. You ask yourself, for example, these receipts, we had issue that the use of AI by some students.
Yeah.
We have issue of people compromising the thumbprint, as in the access into the exam. We have people, that is why, now, the issue at stake now is that there is a trust deficit in JAMB score or JAMB results. Now, with what has happened, how do we now know? How can JAMB prove now that those who are scoring high, because you see parents saying, this is not the result that their children deserve. We know our children. Why those who score high are rejoicing? The few percentage. Now, the issue, what this has led us is that one cannot even now say confidently that whatever results you see is a true reflection of the performance of that student or that candidate rather, because of what has happening. And so we are saying that JAMB has to be reformed.
Are you blaming JAMB? Are you blaming the schools? Sorry. Why are you laying the blame, the JAMB, the schools, the parents? JAMB can be responsible for people scoring low.
No. Of course, you saw what happened about from Lagos and the five Southeast states, where JAMB came up and they refused the result. They said, this cannot be our results.
Yeah, but people have been arrested there from what I read.
No, the question you should be asking is, how come JAMB had praised these results earlier? If not for the resistance, the uproar that arose. This is the same result JAMB has certified and praised. So how come they quickly released this result? There was no independent audit. So this, I know a whole number of issues people begin to ask.
So let's get back to the issue. What particular reforms should we be doing? Either how kids go to school or their timing. Before it used to be, is it 333? Then what reforms? Is it JAMB system? What reforms to either make our children more intelligent, if I can put it like that, or score higher What reforms?
Of course, the reforms is not just about scoring higher or not scoring higher.
Good.
The issue that is happening now is that there is a perception that the system is compromised. Where a student, a candidate, feel that the results you gave to him is not the true state.
So what do you
of what
recommend?
he wrote. So it means there is already a problem. Now, one, we are saying part of our first reform is that JAMB should not be a yearly exercise. JAMB aspiration that do expire yearly should not be so. There is no justification for that. So we are saying that JAMB should be able to serve Nigerian students for at least 3 to 4 years. Now, there should be, what we are saying about that, similar exams like JAMB all over the world does not expire 1 year. For example, TOEFL, test of English as a foreign language, 2 years. IELTS, English language testing system, expires 2 years. SAT, equivalent of JAMB in the US, Scholarship Aptitude Test, expires 5 years. GRE, Graduate Record Exam, does not expire less than 5 years. So we are saying, why will poor Nigerian students be subjected to yearly rituals of exam, if not that JAMB has deviated from the original reason it was set up? JAMB now sees itself as a revenue generating agency. Does it not worry you that what JAMB celebrates each year is to rake in funds and announce money raked in for government? Was JAMB supposed to be a revenue generating agency or an exam assessment body? So we are saying that JAMB should not be expiring yearly. A candidate who scored up to 250 should be able to use that result for 4 years. After which, if he or she desire to upgrade, he can now sit for it. Because this same thing falls back on the household who have been declared multidimensionally poor by the World Bank. So the parents, these same parents, receives the economic burden. You have to buy fuel, 900 rand. You have to talk about electricity bill that is high. You now, every year, you write JAMB.
Which means you pay.
And the problem is this.
All right, well, we don't have all the time in the world. But
Now,
I think
the second reform, very quick, I'll just highlight them. Second return is that we're talking about a mental health, integration of a mental, with what is already happening. These teenagers do not have the capacity to absorb shock. So JAMB has to begin to now evolve and think with the current reality to integrate mental health programs, partner with Federal Ministry of Health, partner with NGOs who works around health, and have like mental health kits, so that as you are registering, there should be something to begin to prepare them. We don't want to be losing our dear children.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Because
of the
whatever.
19-year-old that lost her life. All right, thank you so much, Kenneth Chukwudi, the convener of Speak Out Africa Initiative and Educational Accountability Group, for being on the news. Thank you so much.